Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first breakout session, Decision Making, How to Open Yourself to New Ideas. My name's John Monroe, and I'm the Director of Content here at GovLoop. And for the session, I'm also your moderator. Thanks so much for joining us. So, let's face it, when it comes to decision making, many of us tend to kind of get set in our ways. We like to think about things kind of the way we always do, and there's good reason for that. We want to stick with what works. But sometimes we need to shake things up. We need to consider different perspectives. We need to consider new ideas or new approaches to old problems, and that can be hard. So that's what we're talking about here this morning. This session will explore how to challenge assumptions, embrace diverse perspectives, and make smarter, more forward-thinking decisions. But before we get to that, just have a few housekeeping reminders to go over. So first, we have additional resources available for you to download, including the slide deck, and you can find those in the Resources tab at the bottom of the screen. If you'd like to use the closed captioning feature, just look for the captions icon also along the bottom of your screen. And of course, we hope you don't have technical difficulties, but if you do, just send a message through that Q&A tab, and my colleague Andrew will help you out. And you can use that same tab to ask questions of our speaker. Feel free to submit those questions at any time during the presentation. I'll be keeping an eye on that. We also have an open chat available for you today where you can interact with other attendees. And this is one of the most popular features of NextGen. So please take part, talk with people, see what they're hearing. Just don't be shy. And if you miss anything, if you have to step away for any reason, don't worry. Tomorrow, we're going to email you a link where you can watch the entire event online, this session and everything else. Also, we are giving out 1 CPE credit for your participation in today's session. To do that credit, to earn that credit, you need to do 3 things. 1, stay and participate for the entire session. That's not going to be a problem. You're going to love it. 2, take all the polls. And 3, fill out that post-event CPE evaluation. So the polls will appear on your screen as kind of a pop-out window. Just select your response, click submit, and you'll be good to go. And you can find that CPE evaluation form in the resource module on the console here, or in the resource center in the main environment. And all CPEs will be emailed directly to you once we've confirmed that you've met all the requirements. So easy peasy. All right, with all that housekeeping out of the way, let me introduce you to our speaker. Joining us is Kirstin Austin. Kirstin is Chief Learning Strategist at Meadow Consulting, LLC. Kirstin, the floor is yours.
Oh, okay. I didn't have to turn off my mute. I am here. I am delighted to be here with you this morning. I come from a history, almost 19 years in government. And before that, I was in private sector. So I just retired from the IRS. I was the chief learning officer there and now have transitioned to the consulting side. So I understand the challenges of being in public service, be it state, local, federal, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. I was inspired by those keynote openers, one about the culture and always keeping the culture in mind. I know I found that true for myself through my career, and also the how you're making decisions about where you're putting your energy. That was very useful, and I think you'll find that some of those themes will continue in our session. Especially how you choose to react to challenging situations and how you pull on your own strengths. So we're going to talk about that. And I like to have questions and comments during the session. So thank you, John, for monitoring that, and feel free to put them in, and he'll know when there's a good time to take a little break, and I can answer your questions, or we can have a little conversation. So in this session, we're going to look at how you can open yourselves to new ideas so that you don't fall into the pattern of, I've always done it this way, or our organization's always done it this way, or our upper leadership always wants it this way. You're going to have a way to take a deep breath and have time to think about other ways of doing things that will lead to a better result. So I'm going to help you identify how to pull on your own natural strengths. You've got it in you. to be able to embrace a variety of perspectives, make decisions based on data, and get good results that way. And then I'd like to point out that you have the natural talents that allow you to open up your decision making to take in good data and valuable points of view. So have faith in yourself. We're going to look at that. So it is human nature to stay with the known, but it is also human nature to learn and explore. So you've got to pull on these different areas so that you can make a plan and come up with better decision making. So you're going to see those boxes at the bottom. You can learn to expand your data input, leverage your allies, explore your own learning styles and leverage that to make better decisions. And then you're going to pull on inspiration, because there are all times that we've all just hit a wall and we can't see a different way. And we're going to talk about a creative way of getting moving forward. And then you'll talk about making a plan. I'm going to start with an example. This may sound familiar to many of you, which is I was running a team that was analyzing data that had come in across a large government organization. This was before I came to IRS. So we had all this employee feedback across the entire organization. We prepared the presentation for our senior leaders that explained the data in a certain way. We got back, we don't want it like this. We want it this other way. And we want it in by close of business. I bet if is there a way to raise hands as other people experience that? You've got 3 hours to revamp the entire report. So this was definitely an example of we had to be creative in our decision making about how we were going to revamp all this data we presented in a short period of time. And on top of it all, as the leader, some people in my team, this made them very anxious. We can't do it. We can't. We might as well just give up and go home. All the way to like resigned, like, oh, well, they always do this. So I used these techniques to move my team forward, and we succeeded. And we got leadership a new report out of all this data. But we had to expand our data input, leverage our allies, use different ways of getting at data through different learning styles, and get inspired. So I'll share with you how we did that. So let's start with the data. Where can you get more data? Well, from being in a large organizations, there's always more data lurking out there that you can find. You think that, oh, this is the data I have, there's no other data. So you need to look at ways of expanding your data input and getting data from your allies. So for example, there may be a person that has data because it's their job to track something that's very particular to their job, and you could get data from them. Or there's probably systems out there, because people make all these duplicate systems. There's probably systems out there that they could tell you about and walk you through that. Then you're going to need them to help you interpret the data. So let's look at what that might look like. So for example, when I was running this vast training enterprise in IRS, we had to work closely with both IT, who was running a lot of the equipment and the systems that supported both the virtual and classroom platforms. So like this platform we're on now. But we also had to work with the people who did the physical space, because there were, we still did, like many organizations, just certain classes you've got to do live. So if we're hit with something like, how are you going to deliver? We just hired, believe it or not, we did a lot of hiring, and I think IRS will have, it hasn't stopped, because there's always a need for people to do customer service and basic services at IRS. And I'm sure other government agencies are like that you've got to have some, hiring that's going to happen because there's high turnover or whatever it is, to meet the needs of your taxpayer, either your state and local or federal. So we had to get data from the people who were doing the hiring plans. We had to get data from the people who controlled the physical space. We had to get data from the IT folks. All of them had a different perspective that helped us make decisions about how to offer the training and make sure it was on time, best quality, meeting the customer where they were at. So if we had sat in our training bubble and not talked to all of our partners, we wouldn't have the best data. And then sure enough, somebody would tell us, well, in the physical management space, we have this whole other system. Nobody knew about this other system. They walked us through. You open your mind, you listen to what they have to say about what they have. And then they helped us apply that that learning that we got from the data and how it could help us make a decision. So if you can, why don't you type in the chat places where you think you might be able to ask an ally or another department for data. And while you're doing that, I think I have other examples. The most powerful data you can get often is also from your business operations partners, because they might have insight into like real-time performance metrics. Is the organization meeting its goals? And then you can adjust based on that. The IT department, absolutely. Operations and HR. I'm seeing what people are putting in there. IT department, actually, and IT, boy, they have lots of information. They may not even understand that you would be interested. And that's why it's so good to build your allies and get more data from them. Go
Oh,
ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I know sometimes it can feel intimidating to reach out to someone who's not in your department, who's not in your orbit,
Mm-hmm.
and to suddenly be saying, "Hey, can you got some stuff you can share with me?" How do you work that?
Yeah, so this is actually a good time then to talk about building our allies, which I believe is the next slide. Let's see. Yes, allies. So there's a couple of different levels that you can approach your relationships with your allies. So it's always valuable to build peer-to-peer relationships across the various departments that you may work with. So do you have a chance to volunteer for some kind of action group that's going to be multi-department? You're going to build allies, people you can go ask. Even if they don't have the information, they can refer you to somebody that you have. You can also go more formal if you have to. Ask your boss to reach out to their peer in the other department to say, hey, we need some help finding this data. Who can help us? So you need to think about, how do I build my informal allies across all departments by joining like employee groups, you'll meet people, or short-term work groups. Ask your team members, who do they know? And then also ask your boss to help you identify people you can ask. Interestingly enough, that ties back to the person who gave the presentation this morning. He said, if you're presenting something to your boss, make it really simple. And that would apply here. If you're going to ask your boss, make sure you say, I need to talk to somebody in IT who knows about X. It's so we can make a decision on this to move the project forward, which will give us Y benefit. Stop right there. That's all the boss needs to know. And see if you can get it. I'm seeing people with finance and accounting. Oh, yes, acquisition. That's a big one. And I've discovered, let me talk about acquisition, because I've discovered that when I make relationships with people in acquisition and ask them for their help and their data, sometimes, for example, they're like, oh, well, we have this existing contract that you could add on to. I had no visibility into it. But by building those allies, they can share this kind of information with me. So let's look at these ways of building your allies. You need to think about, if you're making a particular decision, like, for example, I gave that example of, we had to figure out a way, decide how we were going to reconfigure all this data to present to senior leadership. Who in the organization had a stake in that wanted to help us? So we knew HR processing had a stake in it. We knew certain business owners had a stake in it. We could ask them for input about how to interpret the data, because you may not understand it all, and they can give you a really valuable insight. The other thing I've noticed, that if you're in a large organization and you go on to the organization's, homepage that's on your intranet, sometimes it will be right there. It'll say, do you have a question about, the procurement system? You can talk with somebody, enter your question here. There are people that are dying for somebody to ask them a question. because nobody ever asks them about their specialty. So look around on your intranet as well. So you want to think about ways, the second tile there, you want to think about ways that you can expand your perspective. One of the most important things about making good decisions as you're moving projects along is you need to quiet your own ego. Now, what do I mean by that? When you go into any decision making, process, be it like quick or it's going to take you a week because you got to gather all this data before you decide how to proceed, you're going to come in with a preset notion of how it should go. The best favor you can do for yourself is to acknowledge what your preset is. Like, okay, I think we should do it this way. Or I already think the data is going to tell us this. And you've got to tell yourself purposefully to set that aside so that when your allies give you a different perspective, you don't immediately dismiss it. And I can tell you when you first start doing that, it can feel really uncomfortable. I can remember times when I purposefully set out to ask allies who would have a totally different perspective. Tell me about this. What's your business need? What are you experiencing? How do you interpret this data? They would say things that I could just feel like this physical, gut reaction, like they've got to be wrong. You've got to tell yourself to stop because you are collecting data. So if you are collecting data and you want to make the best decision and the most expansive decision that makes you more creative and more impactful, you have to quiet that inner critic and take in all the data, all the contributions neutrally. I'm not saying they're right, but you got to take it in neutrally. If you dismiss it out of hand, you're hurting yourself. So, and that takes practice. Like you have to remind yourself, let me not dismiss this. Let me listen to each person, and then I'm going to go back with my group, and we're going to look at input from this group and input from that group, and we'll really think about it. And I wish somebody had told me that earlier in my career, that it's important to silence your inner critic and your inner opinion while you're in this phase. You also want to see, I have a note about speak confidentially. If you have allies that you've got to have developed a relationship with them, that that you can call and say, hey, off the record, can I have 20 minutes of your time? I'm going to tell you, I'm having this challenge. What do you think? That is so valuable. But you got to be sure you can trust the person who will talk with you off the record, and they'll be frank with you, which again can be difficult to hear. But at least they're giving you your frank opinion. It doesn't mean they're right or wrong. It's just to take it in. And I actually have an example from my personal life, which has been powerful for me. I have a friend who she's very blunt. She's very, very blunt, but she comes from a really good place. Like she's blunt because if I ask her for her opinion, because she cares about me and she wants to give me what she thinks. So I make sure that I really listen to her. And it can be hard when I ask her for her opinion, but I just take it in. We're speaking confidentially, and I can decide later if I think she's giving me good advice or not, or good data or not. And then always be thinking about who you can forge new relationships with. One of the tips I give people here is that you're going to have better decision making the more perspectives you can pull in, and then how to evaluate them because they're not all equal. So in my career, I've always volunteered for the committee, gotten on that cross collaborative call so I can meet people and build a relationship with them. Yes, I know you can't volunteer for every committee. You're going to have to pick what's going to serve you, just going back to that keynote presentation we had. And I think, are there any comments or questions? We can take some now.
I don't think so. Let me just check the questions one more time. Let me just refresh that. Nope. But shall we do the first poll?
Yes.
All right, let's do that. So here's the first poll. What tactics, so kind of a little review here. What tactics can you, what tactics can you use to expand your openness to creative decisions? Yeah, and check all that apply. So, it's funny. No one is checking cutoff data input, so the team doesn't get confused. But I mean, how do you know when to stop? That's something when I was a young reporter, I wouldn't stop reporting a story. I would just kind of keep reporting and reporting and reporting until I was overwhelmed. So how do you manage that?
Did you want me to talk about that now or wait, give people a
Oh,
chance
that's
to
up to
answer?
you. Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you all a second to finish answering the poll. Okay. And John, you raised a great point. It's not that you never cut off data, it's that you got to give it enough time. But when is that time? You, as the leader of the team, you may not be a formal leader in your organization, but if you're the leader of your team, you have to look at when do we need to stop so we can make a timely decision and move forward with our project or our process or whatever it is. What is the phrase? It's so funny. People say organizations can fall in love with admiring problems. They just keep admiring. Here's our results. John, did you want to note something about that?
Yeah, so it looks like definitely reaching out to allies is the clear leader, as well as leveraging your team's natural learning styles, and yeah, and examining data from less obvious sources. I love that.
Okay, great. So, but yes, you do have to at some point. So you don't want to fall into analysis paralysis. That's one phrase people hear where you just keep analyzing data and you never move forward. And you don't want to admire the problem for too long. Admire the problem for a set of time, but maybe in your planning stage, you could say, this is the time where we're going to collect all this data, talk to allies. And you know what? You can even, it's almost like if you had a product and you were doing some soft testing with users, you can even come up with what you're considering and go back to your allies and say, hey, this is the
Mm.
conclusion we came to. Get some feedback from them before you lock it down. But thank you,
Like that.
John, for bringing up that point because you can't go on forever. And I will share with you all as a leader, one of the, you know how you get feedback from your team. One of the pieces of feedback that I would regularly get from my team is they appreciated that I would hear the input, hear the data, hear the perspectives, but I would make a decision, the decision I had to make, and I would move out and I would move the team out. People appreciate it that they've been heard, you've looked at the data, but they don't want to keep admiring the problem. They want to move out. So people will appreciate that about you. So let's talk about what do I mean by leverage your learning style to help you make decisions. So you've probably heard of some of these styles, like a visual learning style, an auditory learning style. Kinetic learning approach means you need to move, you need some kind of physical movement. So what does that mean for decision making? So visual would be, are you the type of person that if you make a flow chart, a decision tree, an Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is you visually have to do, you make a big, you know how there's always somebody who like puts everything on the whiteboard in such a compelling way and then the team can have a good discussion or they have a way of analyzing that. Use your strength. If that's your strength or a team member's strength, have them say, go off, make me a nice flow diagram about this so we can consider our options. When I was a little girl, my father was an engineer. So I love flow charts and decision trees. But when I was a little girl, if I came home from school like crying or upset that I didn't know what to do about something, he would pull out his engineering graph paper, because this is back in the day, and we would make a decision tree together. And it helped, because I was upset. I was a kid. By putting things down like that you can look at visually, when it grounds you, so you're less in your head, like spiraling with, we can't do that, it's too confusing, this decision will never move forward. You've put something down, you've grounded yourself, and everybody can look at it and discuss it and figure out where to go. So that's one thing I would say. And it's not that everybody has to be good in all of these things. You find people on your team who are good at different things. Other people need an auditory stimulus for learning about the data and whatever you need to move your decision forward. So maybe some people need a robust discussion because they got to hear it, or they need to go. I used to work with a guy we would bring up some new topic, or we're going to do training on this new topic. Maybe we're going to do something on how you incorporate AI in writing job aids. Like, let's just pick that as a topic. We would discuss it. He would come back the next day and say, well, I listened to some podcasts on this, or I found he had to go and process something auditorily so that he could come back to our decision-making meeting and contribute and move us forward. Then finally, the kinesthetic approach. The value of going, if you're confused, your mind is jumbled, you go for a walk. That's the kinesthetic approach, that you had to go and physically move your body to let all the thoughts settle into a good pattern that you could then make a decision. And you know how sometimes, have any of you done uh, team building events? Team building events where they make you get up and move. Like maybe you have to, I did one once where we had to like figure out how to use material in the room to create something that looked like a bridge, for example. So we had to move. It's to get a different part of your brain thinking. I would love for you all to put in the chat, what's one of these techniques that you've used? Like what works for you or works for your team? It could be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic.
Yeah, I'll say while people are putting that in, on my team, we talk things out, and one thing we say at GovLoop is there's no such thing as a bad idea. Or if you have a half-baked idea, present the half-baked idea and let's see what happens. And we just like talk it out until something begins to take shape. And then it's like, okay, now we're on a path and now we know what to do. But we just kind of give it that free form discussion.
Okay. I can see many people are a fan of the going for a walk to help your brain clear. And I know some people go for runs, that same effect. Or maybe they go work out, visual and auditory. Yeah. And then let's go back to that example I gave at the beginning when we had presented all this data in this beautiful slideshow. And then the leaders were like, no, we don't want it like this. You have to redo it. So I had one team member who was very upset about it and felt that we couldn't succeed. This was the story he was telling himself in his mind. So I used auditory techniques for him to talk it through with him. I had another team member who was very analytical. To her, I could say, why don't you go make us some samples of what this new data presentation could look like? That helped her work it through. I'm sure I went for a walk someplace in there because I need that to move forward. So yes, and then somebody's like, right, do something different, take a shower, a podcast, anything to shake up your brain. And there's brain science behind all this. Your brain has different pathways, and when you are inputting a lot of new data, your brain is like, it can feel overload because it hasn't found the place to file everything. It hasn't found all the synapses. It's like taking in all this stuff. When you take a break and do something else with your brain, like you go for a walk or you like set yourself a specific task. I'm going to make this beautiful flow chart. Whatever it is that you do, you're giving your brain time to work on all that data so that it will come together for you. So it's kind of like, and I know earlier in the opening, somebody mentioned sleep, how important sleep is. And there's brain research about how when you're sleeping, your brain is compiling and filing all of this information so you can access it better and make more sense of it. So you've got to give yourself time. And I think this is especially important if people are upset about the decision that's been put before you. Like, you got to change the direction of your project. How are you going to do it? Change your data analysis. Move up the date of a deliverable. All these things require decision making. So how are you going to move yourself forward? People can get upset about that, and you need to bring them down from that and let them access their natural talents. And I see somebody, here's some good suggestions. I like this. Brain dump, like write everything down, step away, come back, right? And then it says somebody adapting what you're doing as the leader for a team member that says they need to walk through the issues using some visual tools so they can move forward. As the leader, thank you so much, those of you put in these examples. As the leader, it's so important that you adapt to your team members, because the way you succeed and get the results you need is pulling the best out of your team members. So decision making in an organization is rarely just you by yourself, right? You got to pull on your team or your allies and people, and pulling the best out of them is really important. And so kudos to you all for seeing that, what your team member might need to move forward.
And
Let me
actually,
see if there's
Kirstin,
any, yeah.
got a question, and I'm going to bring it up now. You can answer it whenever it makes sense, but it's a good question. How do we advocate for a solution that doesn't match leadership priorities or expectations? So we have
Ah,
an idea and we know it doesn't really align with the way leaders think. So,
so
um,
it's how do we present such a decision, a new
yes,
approach
yep.
that's
How do
my,
we advocate for it? Yep, exactly.
how do we advocate for that? I will talk a little bit about that now.
Okay.
Um, so you've got to give them what's in it for them. That's really the bottom line. It's not that they won't ever hear a new approach, it's that you've got to tell them why in the world you're presenting it to them. So often, if I want to present a new approach that maybe is not what they were expecting or not what's been done in the past or whatever, is that you might want to become prepared with a high level overview of what they were expecting and then what you're expecting is an alternative so that they see you heard them. Because if you look like you completely blew off everything that they wanted, sometimes that doesn't work. It will depend on your relationship with your leader and how many layers up we're talking about. But if you say, yeah, we heard you and we could do it this way, but we're proposing because we looked at all this data, we got the input from our business partners, we did all this stuff. We've discovered that we think it would be better to do this other approach. This is what the business will get out of it. What is the bottom line up front for you? We will be faster, we will have less mistakes, we will reach more people, whatever the business impact is. You got to lead with that about why it's better. Okay, did
Excellent.
that help, John? Is there? And I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have too.
No, I think that sounds great. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, one thing when there's that kind of misalignment is always acknowledging kind of where the other person is.
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of like, yeah, I know this is really important. Here's another way of looking, and I know this is important because here's another way of looking at that could help because, and so there's that observation and kind of
Right.
affirmation.
Absolutely. That's a good point. And I think you said that a little better than I did about show them that you did answer the question the way they wanted. That's acknowledging their point of view. The other thing, this made me think of another useful example. You might have, I know I had lots of cross department committees that would meet, once or twice a month or something. And you know how there's always certain people who play certain parts in these meetings. Like there's the naysayer, there's the enthusiastic one, there's the I'll be really quiet until the last second and then I'll drop a bombshell or all these things. I discovered in some meetings that sometimes the naysayer got like that because nobody listened to them.
Mm.
And so when I would encounter a naysayer who was stopping moving forward on a decision on a new way of doing something, usually offline, like I might offer in the larger setting and say, let me touch base with you after this meeting. And I want to hear in more detail about what your concerns are. And then I would reach out to that person and have I had to sincerely mean it. I was going to hear their point of view. Often, not always, often the very fact that I would listen to them made them able to move off their naysayer point of view. We had an example. We were trying to change the type of, if you're in, I know federal government, there may be similar things in state and local where supervisors are required to take a certain amount of training per year. In federal government, we have that. They have to take a certain amount of training per year. And we were proposing changing how much we have to meet the bare minimum, but we were going to change it. We were going to change how they accessed it. So one of my favorite naysayers was, we can't do this, blah, blah, blah. So I talked to her separately and I let her talk about why she felt, not heard, why this wasn't addressing the needs of her organization. I was able to offer alternatives that acknowledged her different data. She had different data. And I was able to turn her into an ally.
Mm.
So I would really recommend that. Good question. Okay. Do we have a poll next or
Yep,
not quite
let's
yet?
let's do the next poll.
Okay.
Give me okay. Um, all right. So the next one is what strategies can you use basically to gain buy-in from key allies? when proposing a new idea. So please check all that apply. It's interesting you talked about sometimes when you're hearing something and that your first thought is they're wrong. And something that someone taught me a long time ago was if I hear something and I having that kind of initial reaction, the way I buy myself time is I say, tell me more. Now, tell me more is a good question because it actually might get you more kind of input that helps you understand what's being said, but it also kind of gives you a chance just to, you know, think about your reaction before you say anything. It's just buying time.
That is great, John. And I myself have used that one when I could feel myself like, if I had team members who were presenting to me and I felt like they were off topic and I was feeling myself getting frustrated, because I felt like they were wasting my time, I would make myself stop and say, can you tell me more about that? I used exactly that technique because sometimes it was me. I might have been missing the point or it was buried in there and I might as well hear it, and then I could give them feedback later about tightening up their presentation.
That's great. That's great. Okay, we'll just give people a few more seconds. I think looks like I think everyone has taken it who's taking it. So let's take a look at the results. Any surprises here? Any observations?
I'm looking at it. Yeah, I think that third one, reaching out to past critics, that was the example I just gave. Um, to try to bring them into the fold. That was when I was the chief learning officer. That was one of my main jobs, is trying to bring people into the fold. They had, sometimes people have been promised something by people who were there that you don't even know because they've left, but the people who've been there a long time remember, and you have to win them over. It's a very valuable thing to spend some time on.
Okay, great.
Okay. Oh, that's right. I can forward the slide. So let's talk about inspiration. So say you've been trying this, you've been analyzing, you have flow charts, you have a whiteboard, you have spreadsheets, you've talked to the allies, you've even talked to your enemies and you've won them over, but you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so much, I don't know what to do. So one of the things that I think helps, in addition to things we talked about, get enough sleep, go for a walk, do something different to free up your brain, is to think about an historical figure that you find inspiring and look at what did they do to make a difference and to move forward and make good decisions. So who inspires you? And you might even think, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I was really inspired by this historical figure. And you think about, well, what challenges did they face? And how did they work? Who did they work with? And how did they overcome obstacles? So let's start with an example. Because there's been books written about this. For example, President Abraham Lincoln. There was a book written about a team of rivals. It was called, where this historian, I think it was Doris Kearns. Am I forgetting her
Yeah,
last
Doris
name?
Kearns Goodwin.
Goodwin. Thank you. Why I forgot her. Remembered her first name, but she wrote. It's a very good book, and it talks about how Lincoln leveraged the rivalries and the different perspectives in his cabinet to get the data he needed to make good decisions. So you can think about something like that. Maybe you like history, you read a book about that, but that's a good example. And it's a very accessible example to people to think about. Okay, he did have a team of rivals. He made sure he had different points of view. He did spend time hearing from the different points of view. He would go off by himself to ponder everything. And he would also, because I recently read a biography about Lincoln that was not that one, but a different one. He would take time to explain his decision making to his team, so that they could get on board. Now, did they always get on board? Of course not. We're talking about, very strong-willed people, but that was the process that he would overcome. And then he overcame obstacles doing this. And if you've seen the movie called Lincoln, it shows the process that Lincoln used to get people to vote for I think it was the 14th Amendment. You can help me out here, John.
Yeah, 13th or 14th.
13th
Yeah,
and 14th.
one of those. Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, that's a really accessible one, and everybody's heard of Abraham Lincoln. So let's go. Oh yeah, I got the slide. Okay. I'm going to talk about one of my personal inspirations, Clara Barton. This is now from the same time period, the Civil War, American Civil War. I find her very inspiring. You may best know her name because she was the founder of the American Red Cross. Before that, she has a very interesting history. Um, she learned nursing hands-on because her brother was injured when she was probably a tween or a teen, and she did the nursing for him for a number of years and learned what it takes. She became a teacher, and then she moved to Washington, D.C., wanted to work for the government, wanted to get the same pay as men. She has a famous quote where she says, if I'm doing the same work as men, I want the same pay as men. I don't know that she was always successful, but there was a case when she was asked to do a teaching position where she did secure the same pay as the male teachers when she insisted. So what she found herself in Washington, D.C. In the Civil War, and she looks out to the disaster that was these battles, because the first battles were fairly near Washington, D.C. And I don't know if you know this about Civil War history. People would ride in their carriages out to watch the battles with picnic baskets because they thought it was all going to be this grand adventure. It was all going to be over in a month or two. And, depending on which side you were on, that's what you thought was going to happen. So she was close enough. She went out to sea, and her nursing experience came to the fore. And she's like, this is awful. This is awful. There's no organized response. There was no organized response of how to take care of all these soldiers. People who had ridden out in their carriages for a picnic realized, this is not what we thought. This is gruesome and horrible. So she organized rapid response to she would collect people would volunteer to provide all the supplies, like gauze, whatever bandages, whatever medicines they did have. She would organize it all, and she would show up at the battlefields in her wagon with all the supplies that the army did not have. And she would direct everybody about how to do care right there on the battlefield. There's a famous story of her arriving at a battle, and I wish I could remember which one. I should refresh my memory. And it was after dark, and you could hear the soldiers on the battlefield just moaning because they'd had their battle. They were out there laying there injured. And apparently there was some general in a barn just kind of like, I can't do anything. It's too dark. And she arrived with her wagons of supplies. She marched into there and did the equivalent to the general of snap out of it. Snap out of it. We're going out there now. And she organized everybody to go out there and treat these soldiers. So, and then she went on, there's whole stories about how she used all of her skills to organize the American Red Cross. So I find her very inspiring about all the obstacles she overcome. So she built allies. She'd get all these, allies, people who would donate to her cause, give her supplies, give her money. She would go out there and take charge and make sure things work the way they did. And if they didn't work, she used that data to adapt her approach. So this is why I find her inspiring. And I try to think about the severity of the problems that she overcame, which are nothing like, my day-to-day life in the federal government. If she can be that strong, I can be that strong too, and build the allies, get the data, get the resources, and muster the support to make good decisions and get good results. And then I see people are putting some things in here.
Yeah, I just asked if people wanted to put their name,
Yeah.
yeah, because actually I thought about Eleanor Roosevelt because,
Please.
FDR did all those social programs, but all those programs were based on the research that Eleanor did out in the field. She realized that they needed to have firsthand, data gathering. And so she just traveled around and then brought back information. And that's what went into making all sorts of laws. And so,
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. That's why I love learning this stuff. And if history is your not cup of tea, maybe there's an athlete that inspires you because of what they overcame. Or maybe there's somebody in your local community, at your church, at your synagogue, wherever, your mosque, that inspires you because of what they've done and move things forward. You don't have to pick a historical figure. Some people pick a figure from fiction because
Mhm.
there was some book that they read or movie they saw that they found inspiring about how they overcame things. Um, for example, some people are inspired by the characters in Lord of the Rings. That's a good one. Like Frodo with his relentless but gentle determination. There's so many good examples. So if you have one from fiction or sports or maybe something else, please put that in too. I'd love to hear from you.
All right, so should we do the third poll, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
actually asking people to think about this? All right, so think of a historical figure or figure from, anyone who inspires you. And, why is that? So please take the poll now. Yeah, I mentioned Eleanor Roosevelt because I got interested in her when I was reading about FDR. And I suddenly realized, oh, she was the person who actually brought him down to earth and, took his grand ideas and actually, you know, gave him a reality check. And I just thought that was, at that time, that was just so gutsy and so powerful.
Oh, I'm gonna have to ask you for what book I should read on her.
Geez, there's really no good book. There is
Uh,
a book that's about the two of them during the war. I think it's something on the home front or something. And
oh,
it's a
okay.
marvelous book. It's a marvelous book. But yeah, she doesn't have a great biography right now that I can find.
Oh, wow, that's
They're either
amazing.
too in depth or they're too shallow.
Right. So that's and these are all good examples. Like I see Jane Goodall, she just recently passed
Oh, yeah.
away. Very inspiring. Forrest Gump, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It can be somebody fictional, that's fine. Jimmy Carter, all these things. Think about and read a little about, and you don't have to pick up a big thick book if that's not your thing. You could go on Wikipedia and read about them to get started, and then you'll be like, well, what is it about them? And you could go, go to Jimmy Carter's Wikipedia just to get started and say, oh, what did he overcome? I know he has that famous thing that he saved a nuclear submarine. I'm not going to remember the whole story,
Yeah.
but you could find out what is it about them. Maybe you haven't even thought about why they inspire you and what are the qualities that you could adapt and help you make better decisions. And then why do we want to make better decisions? Because we want better outcomes.
Yeah, when I remember first time I read a biography, a memoir of Jimmy Carter, he wrote quite a few. But the one thing I really admired about him was, he made a lot of mistakes and he admitted them. He goes, yeah, that wasn't such a good idea, and I just found that that's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's taking in more data. Learn from your mistakes. You're not going to find anybody successful, be they in business or historically or whatever, if they can't make a mistake but find a way to go forward. Yeah. Okay.
So it looks like the number one result is integrity and moral values.
That is great.
A good book for that is David Brooks, The Road to Character.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion. And if you want, you could put it, if there's a book that you found inspiring, please put it in there. It's great to share these ideas. And again, that like when I say, oh, just go on Wikipedia and read about the person you find inspiring as a way to start. This goes back to what we were saying about how do you make better decisions by taking in more data. That's a different thing. It's like I'm not reading the work report. I'm not focusing on our business results. Instead, I'm like going to read about this other person, but it's going to open my mind and get new neural pathways going. Saving Private Ryan. Yep. That's a good example. Absolutely. And you can see the points where he has to make very difficult decisions to get to his goal. That's a really good one. I feel like I should rewatch that.
Hmm.
Okay.
All right, we do have one question here.
Yes.
How can we avoid introducing our biases when, selecting a course of action or a solution to a problem?
Right. So I think this goes back to the thing about you've got to quiet your inner critic um, to take in more data. And it is a balancing act. So if you can quiet that inner critic, and I don't, this is like a constant, this isn't like you do it once and you're done. You have to constantly, to be a good leader that of a group that's making a major decision or a series of major decisions, because if you're running a big project, you know it's going to be a series of major decisions about how you move forward and are successful. Um, you have to constantly remind yourself, I've got to silence my inner critic so I can take in more data, more points of view, build my allies. That is the number one thing. But then you're right. You have to get to the point where you can make a good decision. So you are going to have to bring your own decision making and your own values to bear. So this relates to another topic that I like to explore, which is knowing yourself as a leader. What are your inner values? Um, so, for example, if you are going to make decisions based on your inner values and how they align with your organization's needed outcomes and values, and you've done your due diligence to bring in all this new data and the perspective of allies, you can feel pretty confident. There's no way to not have your own point of view in this because that's impossible. But if you're making it not like you're not making by the hip decisions, you've grounded yourself, you've thought about, what is your value? So let me give you an example. Like I was in private sector before I came to government about 19 years ago. And one of the reasons I came into government was because it was really important for me to work someplace where I was going to be really close to a mission I could believe in. So I could really believe in the public service mission. And there's a couple of reasons why I could really believe in that. Was I had a family history of public service. I really admired those individuals in my family going way back. My grandmother came to Washington, D.C. to work for the federal government in the 1920s. So almost 100 years ago, she was recruited off a little farm to come and work for the government. And she worked her way up, and it wasn't easy. At one point, the government told her, you can't work here because we can't have both a husband and a wife working here at the same time, so you have to leave. So she did. She had to leave for a number of years, but then they changed the rule and she could come back. So I was inspired by that, but I was also inspired by I get to work someplace where I am making a difference to the American taxpayer. I am implementing our wonderful, making real our wonderful Constitution in my role here. That was very inspiring for me. And then when I get to an organization, because I worked at a couple of different fellow organizations, I think, of what's their mission? How do I always support mission? How do I align my values with supporting the mission? So I had a colleague who used to call, so I was in training and development, and she called training is a crucial mission enabler. So I had to think about that to help ground my decisions, that how am I making decisions that's truly going to move training forward? Because the purpose of training in an organization is to make sure people have the skills and knowledge, competencies they need to perform their job, right? And their job should be to support mission. So if you keep those things in mind, it's not that you have to have none of your personal bias. It have to be the true core of you and not some flippant decision or based out of anger or frustration. So I hope that helped with that. But John, if you had something to add.
No, it's good.
Oh, and I see we've gotten some more names in up. Dr. Martin Luther King, absolutely. Here's a book, Hope, a Survival Guide. Okay, good. Oh, that's by Jane Goodall and Douglas Abrams. Okay. Trying times. Many of us are experiencing trying times because I know we have federal employees here who may be on furlough and they came to keep up with their learning and development. Good for you. Here's another one, Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard and Sheldon Bowles. I know I found many of Ken Blanchard's books and that whole series that they do to be helpful because they're very practical and easy to grasp about how to move forward on various things. Okay, great. Okay. I will go on unless you're seeing something else there, John.
Nope, I think we're good to go.
Okay, so finally I've left you with this fairly simple chart, but it can help you organize your thoughts. And then if you have a visual learning style, you can probably make a much better chart. But I've given you your elements, and in the what column, I'm pointing at it like you can see like what I'm pointing at. You have to move. But in the element, those are the elements we talked about. You got to have data, you got to have allies, you got to honor the learning styles of yourself and your team. And then you might want to think about inspiration. You can put that in that what column, and then you could put in the how you're going to get at that data. And so, like in the data column, we talked about go out and find new data sources that you didn't know about. Allies, how are you building allies? How are you keeping in touch with allies? How are you being reciprocal with allies? You can't be just one way and you take. You got to give back to them. One of the best things that I've done throughout my career is when people ask me for help, I always help them. Even if the answer is, I don't know about that, but let me find you somebody who does. So I would develop a reputation in an organization. Oh, she's somebody who will get things done. She'll move it along. She'll find you somebody. That gets you open so many doors. If you are that open and willing to help and willing to listen as best as you can. Now, that doesn't mean you drop everything you're doing, because we all have, deadlines on us. But having that reputation serves you well. And then thinking about the learning styles and and who is your inspiration, if that works for you. So I think that was the topics that I had for you
Excellent.
today. And
No, yeah.
yeah, and let me just I think you're going to get these slides. So if you wanted to contact me, I have phone number, email there. You check out my LinkedIn page. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear about what your challenges are, your ideas. Please feel free to contact me. And I guess I have like 3 minutes to take more questions if there are any, or observations.
I think we are done. So yeah, well, we can give everyone a chance to catch their breath before the lunch keynotes. But thank you so much. This has just been a wonderful, engaging presentation. Really appreciate it. Also, want to thank our 2025 NextGen Partner Alliance for helping put on today's NextGen Summit. And just a few quick reminders before you go. Don't forget to fill out your CPE evaluation to get your credit. If you haven't already, please check out the exhibit hall. We have some amazing booths there filled with lots of good information. And like I said, our lunch keynotes are coming up next. Those will begin at 12:30 Eastern Time, and you can access the lunch keynotes in the main environment. So thank you all for attending, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.